Awesome. All right. And where we're going to be picking up this week is hopefully where we left off. And David and I were talking and we weren't quite sure, and I will take full responsibility for that. And so what we're going to do is just a quick review of what we might have and very likely spoke about last week. And so what I'm going to do, the Davids have a format of how, listen, I learned how to screen share. I learned how to put me in the screen share. We're going to rock and roll with this. And so this is the way in which the Davids like to format their fear inventory. And it's a 2-column format. And I'll speak briefly about sort of what my experience is with that and what column 1 looks like, where we get it, what column 2 looks like for me, where we get it, and some cool things about those. Pop it over to David, and then we'll keep rocking and rolling in the reading. So for me, that first column, I'm fearful of, that comes from top of page 68. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them in paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. And the biggest thing is what we're looking at is what are known as self-centered fears. It can be helpful to, I guess, look at snakes and spiders and airplanes. Fair enough. But really, what I'm looking at is these 2 specific fears. A fear that I'm not going to get what I want, but also a fear that I'm going to lose what I have. And see, when I have a look at those fears, I see that the key component is I and me and not getting my way. And where I can get these fears to populate my fear column 1, it comes from, for me, I get it a lot from my 4th column of resentments. So in my resentments, I see that these fears underpin each and every one of my resentments. Well, it makes sense for somebody like me to take those fears and then get some freedom from them because they were eating me alive. And so I think David, which one? The other one. David was talking about all these different types of fears, and we can see how these fears can shoehorn us and pigeon us into these corners that we can't back our way out of. For example, this is what a lot of column 1, a lot of our fears look like. Let me know if it sounds familiar. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being in a relationship, fear of intimacy, fear of sex, which is different than fear of intimacy. Took me a while to learn that. Like, those things are different. Fear of success, but also fear of failure, right? Fear that at the core of who I am, I don't matter. Fear of at the core of who I am, I don't matter, and everyone sees it. Fear of conflict, fear of confrontation, fear of communication, right? We can see these fears. And I like to work 1 column at a time because I feel like that helps separate the process. So how I do it is I write down all of those fears. And I love to then dive into that 2nd column. Why do I have this fear? And how I write on it is it looks like, and we're gonna, I feel like we're probably gonna end up doing some examples because at least how I like to approach fears, the best way to learn how to do it is to do it. But let's take that fear of rejection. Why do I have this fear of rejection? Because it's happened before, because it's been painful, because it means that nobody will ever love me. It means that I'm going to die alone. It means that I'm inherently unloved and unworthy. And what I can do with that information is I can extrapolate and I can see other fears that I can add to my column 1: fear of pain, fear of being alone, fear of being unlovable, fear of being unworthy. And I can add that there. Now, there's this other way of doing fear inventory and really diving into this 2nd column of why do I have this fear? And I don't know if it's the official name, but it's the because inventory, which is to say, why do I have this fear? Because. And then I answer that question, and then I answer that question. So why do I have this fear? Let's say of rejection, because I've been rejected before and it's incredibly painful. Because now why is that? Because I need people to give me a sense of value and worth. Because at the core of who I am, I feel unloved, unworthy, unvaluable. Because I have a conscious separation from God. Now, I can't tell you what your inventory is going to look like, but when I did fear inventory that way, almost invariably, my fears would roll into either because I have this sense of separateness from God, or I'm trying to play God. And that was what my experience was. But again, I encourage you to have your own. If you want, I can stop the share, thumbs up, turn it over to you. How does that sound? Subtle.
Sounds good. You're awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So what I would say to add a little bit more to this, and or to keep the page rolling, no pun intended, page. So we reviewed our fears thoroughly, and then it says, so just in case we weren't sure if this is a written inventory or not, Bill puts it on right here in the text in the big book. We put them on paper. So this is a written inventory. We knew it was with the resentments with our 4 columns, but it says even though we had no resentments connection to them, we asked ourselves why we had them. So Bill asks us questions in the big book, and I need to answer these questions. And Paige did such a good job of bringing up what these fears look like: fear of losing something I already have, fear of not getting something I want, or how about fear of being found out? And back up to 65, if we want to go back to the illustration in our 3rd column, although Bill doesn't call them columns, but if they are columnized over here, right next to self-esteem is bracketed the word fear. And even though it's in the resentment inventory, it kind of gives us a lead into what these fears look like. And when I'm looking at self-esteem, I'm looking at things like saying things before self-esteem, like I am hardworking, I am happy, I'm a lover, I am all these things. But the thing is, I'm always afraid I'm going to be found out because I live a lie my entire life. So one of the things that Paige brought up is fear of rejection. Like I always had these rocky relationships. I'm a fear that I'm going to lose this relationship because here's my example. I had a neighbor that lived 2 streets, that lived 2 doors down from me. And he was a wonderful father and a wonderful husband and a good employee. The reason why I know that is because his car backed out of the driveway every day and it went to work. And at the end of the day, at like 5 o'clock, it came back home. My car didn't do them things, but I'm just saying. And I was going to model myself after this guy. When I was going to make my change, like I was going to do this way before I got sober. I was going to make this amazing change in my life. I was going to be this guy. But I couldn't pull that off on my own power. And fear, the reason why I have this fear is because of self-reliance. Self-reliance is as good as far as it goes, but it couldn't go far enough here. And it says some of us had great self-confidence. There's things I had a lot of confidence in. I've been a salesperson my entire life, and I've been pretty darn successful at it. But a lot of times I was living a lie. I was stealing. I wasn't being honest. I couldn't look the world in the eye. And I was afraid I was going to be found out. Always looking over my shoulder. When we get to 8 and 9, when we get to 9, I can be relieved of and have freedom from looking over my shoulder. I would, when I start making my amends, I will get relieved of that. It'll be gone. It'll be taken away. And I have to look over my shoulder any longer. So it says, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem. When it made us cocky, it made us work. So overconfident? Yeah, I could be overconfident too, that I can conquer this on my own power. I have found out that that is not true for me. I cannot pull this off on my own power. And the last thing I want to say here is, so when I have fear, and we're going to get to this in the 3rd paragraph, it says men of faith are men of courage. So here's an example that I give for that is if I'm on my amends process, and I know I'm jumping ahead, we're talking ninth step here, but we're talking about this fear. I'm a fear to make this amends. It's going to take some courage. It's going to take some courage for me to pick up that phone, go make that appointment. And I have to make an appointment out of respect, make that appointment. And once I make that appointment, now all of a sudden I have faith in this process that it works. Now I have courage to go do my next amends. That's why it's easier a lot of times to do the simplest amends first, so I can have a great experience with those things. But it takes, I got to get from fear to courage, then I can have some faith. Thumbs up.
That is so helpful because I don't miss those cues. And just to piggyback what you're saying about self-reliance fails us. Now, for me, I format my fear inventory a little different. So if you're coming to David G and David G's Big Book Study, ignore me. Ignore this process. Ignore
Do not
do
listen. Listen well. She's the
and,
best.
But I'm going to talk about how I do it because that's what I got experience with. And for some reason, I just forget to not put me in the picture, but I'm in the picture. I like to format my my fear inventory in this way, where I have 4 full columns. And that how has self-reliance failed me? I like to take that and really write on that in the 3rd column. And when I talk about writing on how has self-reliance failed me, what I'm looking at is how has me relying on me and my power made this fear worse or made this fear come true? And what we can always do is we can start with our most drug addicted, alcoholic, selfish, self-centered day and work forward. But it's also important to get current. And the third column, how has self-reliance failed me? Man, when I'm working with sponsees, they're always like, this is the one they need the most help with. It's conceptually quite difficult. And so how I do it, how we learn it is by doing, which is to say, let's take that fear of rejection. So fear of rejection, why do I have this fear? Because it's painful. It's happened before. It means nobody will ever love me. I'll die alone. I won't have worth, all of that. How has self-reliance failed me? So this is what I begin to look at. Well, here's the deal. Maybe you guys showed up a little bit differently in your active addiction or active alcoholism than I did. But what I have found is that when I steal your car, sleep with your husband, and pee on your carpet, you're less likely to invite me around, which I think that could be you issue. And if you're wondering, I'm just kidding. That never happened. It was linoleum. And so who I am in my active addiction, in my alcoholism, that is not somebody that ingratiates themselves to warmth and inclusion. I'm more likely to be rejected, but also in sobriety, when I'm living on self-will, on self-reliance, I'm driven by what I want and what I need, and I'm driven by my pain, and I can't see when I step on your toes. I can't see when I hurt you. All I can see is the retaliation, and I don't have the capacity to take inventory. I don't know how to make amends. And I know I'm the only one here in this Zoom room that has ever been a little bit codependent. But I tie my whole sense of value and worth to what I think you think of me. And and that means if you reject me, that tears me apart, and I've got no foundation except in what I think you think of me. And that fear of rejection, again, it causes me to have walls, to wear masks, to pretend to be somebody that I'm not, just so I can get an ounce of that value and worth and approval. And I don't know about you, but I start hanging around people that aren't healthy, because that's comfortable and that's familiar. And the people that are unhealed and unhealthy are more likely to reject me. And I'll do things like judge and criticize and gossip because I'm operating from the sense of who I am is not enough, and I need a boost of better than ego to feel okay in my skin. That's the third column. Another third column, because David was talking about fear of making amends. So how has self-reliance failed me in terms of my fear of making amends? Well, I don't know about you guys, but again, my sense of value and worth is tied to the outcome. So I'm obsessing and I'm worried about the outcome, and I need you to like me, and I need you to think well of me. I'm sure no one here has ever postponed doing any sort of amends work and avoided and procrastinated, and nobody knows what it's like to avoid and procrastinate, and then it becomes this mountain of overwhelm. You know what I mean? I'm not going to write it out. I'm not going to talk to my sponsor. I'm going to avoid all of these things and live in that sense of guilt and shame, and it's going to build and build and build, and I won't make the amends. And that's an example of how self-reliance has failed. And I think when we get to the next paragraph, it might be cool to do some examples of, and like, I'll get some examples from the chat because I love shenanigans like that, and just how I take it all the way through and column 4. But yeah, I think that's probably it for column 3, unless we have anything else you'd like to add. I didn't thumbs up.
Okay. The only thing I want to do is how purposeful Bill really is and in his writing. And if you guys want to, let's jump around the book a little bit. There's fun to jump around the book. Let's go back to page 62. Let's go back to the third paragraph. And this is in the second step still. This is like Bill is setting us up here so we can rely on God. So he's given us an introduction, because I have no power, no choice, no control, that I need to find a power greater than myself that can solve my problems. So if we read the last paragraph, the last sentence on page 62 in the second paragraph, it says, we had to have God's help. Have to is a must. We must have God's help. This is what's going. Page had prayer with a nice asterisk and a star, like spectacular in that thing, because I'm going to take prayer into my inventory. Absolutely, positively. And then it says here, this is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. Why? Oh, Bill answers the question. It didn't work. That's why. And it says next. Oh, order of things. Let's do this. We decided hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. So God is going to be our director, one that's in charge of our activities here. Yeah. And then he says he's our principal. One is an order of importance. And then we are his agents, a person who can act on behalf of another. So I will, in this inventory process, in resentments and in fears and in the sex conduct, I can still act on as a agent of God because he's going to work through me. It won't be of me, but it will be through me. And I will have this experience and be able to complete my fourth step. And then it says here, he's our father. So father is the man in the head of the household, or a man in relationships of his natural child. Oh, wait a second then. If that's the case, then that means we're all children of God. God has no grandchildren. I need to get self-reliance is not gonna work for me here. I need to treat everybody like a child of God. And then it says here, most good ideas are simple, true for me. And this concept was the keystone and the new triumphant arch through which we're passed through freedom. Freedom. Oh, so self is showing up all the time, and self-reliance is there. Anytime we see self, we know that's bad. Self must die over and over and over again. And then it talks about on the next page, it says, when we sincerely took such a position, what position? That God is going to be our director, our principal, and our father. I'm not playing God anymore. Then this with another capital letter says we had a new employer, capital letters. What is he? Is all powerful. He provided what we needed. Who is he? He is God. He is the God of my own or my no understanding. And if we kept close to God and performed his work well, that's 12-step work. He established on such a footing, David will become less and less interested in himself and his little plans and designs. Thank you for that, Bill. I thought my plans were spectacular. Found out they're not. They're little plans and very little designs. The more David became interested in seeing what he could do to contribute to life, as David felt power flow in. Please listen to the words on the page. I will have power flowing into me. Again, this is something that is such an experience I got to have with the fourth step. It is a celebration to find out more about the truth about myself. And when I get to 5, I'm going to find out the truth. And when I see the truth, I will know God better. And then I will take my hour pause. I will go home and be quiet for an hour, and I will know God better. Let me just finish that paragraph, and then we'll move on. We felt powerful in as we enjoyed peace of mind. That doesn't sound like self-reliance. That sounds like God reliance to me. And it says, and we became conscious of his presence. That doesn't sound like self-reliance. That sounds like God reliance. We began to lose our fear. Oh my goodness. This is some good stuff. Of what? Today, tomorrow, the hereafter. David was reborn. This is when I make my initial contact with God, and now I continue to grow in effectiveness and understanding of what God's will is for me today. I have not to fear this 4 step. Please don't listen to people in the room sometimes that talk about 4 steps. Oh, that's so scary. You're going to drink a fifth if you don't do it. There's no wrong way to do it. We're just giving you the illustrations. A lot of the stuff we steal from other people. Paige has some wonderful idea. I love listening to Paige talk. Joe and Charlie are the kings of doing a worksheet. And that's what we like to use because it just seems to work. And it's the best that we can come out of the book. But fear is an evil and corroding thread. We thought we found out about that. It permeates me. It's shot through me like fabric, like it just all the way through. I don't want to live like that any longer. This is why I'm going to find out all I can about myself, about the truth here. 2-column inventory. Is that a lot to ask? We just got done doing the resentment inventory. Now we're going to do our fears. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. And listen, I have them do 4 columns. So if you're doing 2 columns, listen, you know what I mean? Like two
Easier,
columns.
softer way.
No, I didn't mean that. No, I was just trying to entice them. Like, ooh, you could do it 4 or just 2. Like trying to. Anywho, back to page 68. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so. That's the paragraph we're on, and I'll read it for realsies. All right, so it says, perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we are now on a different basis. the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role he assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him. Does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? Thumbs up, Abby, for dictionary things. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to co-host you. Hold on, make co-host. They gave me power and
You did good. It's okay.
Shocker.
That's okay. So I have finite, which is having certain definite limits. Calamity is a state of great distress or misery. And serenity is the quality or condition of being serene, which means bright, clear, calm, tranquil, and quiet.
I don't think anyone's ever called me tranquil and quiet. I love it. As we're diving into that, this for me is where I begin to really transition into that fourth column. And we're going to see that beautiful tie-in to what David already read. And as it talks about, hey, we're on a different basis. And when we talk about basis, we're talking about a basis of life, which is to say a way of life. And one of the things that I emphasize is these 12 steps are not a set it and forget it program. I don't get to do this for 30 days, 60, 90 days, 6 months, 9 months, 9 years. This is how I live my life. And this becomes the basis for how I live my life. And when it talks about the basis of trusting and relying upon God and how I begin to trust and how I begin to rely, I don't know about you, I can't force that to happen in and of myself. How I do that is with action and the action of inventory. And when it says we are in the world to play the role he assigns, we just agreed to do that. Step 3, what David was reading at the bottom of 62 is I talk about that being, we get our pink slip, and with sponsees, I'll make them a virtual pink slip so they get fired because I would say sometimes a little much, and then I make them a little employment contract. And so I'm going out from step 3 to work for God. And God's work, like you said, is these 12 steps and helping others, carrying this message to others. And I love that it talks about we're trusting infinite God, rather than my finite self. See, my finite self is that how I write it, that third column, my self-reliance fails me. I'm that flimsy reed. An infinite God is that loving and powerful hand of God that pulls me out of that riverbed. That's what we're talking about, infinite God. And y'all know there was a sneaky little promise in fears. We got prayers, we got promises, sneaky little promise. Here's a promise, and that's the promise, which is to the extent, and you'll notice that each and every promise in this book has some stipulations. There's some fine print, there's some actions, some things that I got to do to get them, which is rude. I was kind of hoping they'd be like Costco samples, get them. Also, I don't get out much. So if somebody wants to take me to Costco, it's very obvious if I'm rolling around and like, I'm a different person. They're going to know it. Don't steal the samples, honest living already. But it says just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard that Thomas Merton prayer. I know it's on some of the AA or non-AA affiliated apps, but that prayer talks about how I might not know the right way. I may not know where I'm going in life, but my hope is that I can just do what would please God, and that humility that I don't always know. So we're doing the best we can to do God's will and humbly rely on him. And that humility, I'm no better, I'm no worse than you. We're equal, and I am dependent on God. Now so that's what's required of me. I got to do the best that I can to do God's will. Now, if you're here today and you're like, I have no idea what God's will is for me, the steps are the bare minimum, I promise we do the actions, the steps, and the rest will sort itself out. And more often than not, God's will is more about how I show up rather than where I show up. But it says, just to the extent where we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity. And calamity, we got the wonderful Big Book 1939 definition, but a modern definition could be pain, suffering, trauma, the awful, the horrific, where your heart is just being rended out of your chest, that level of pain. God, I don't know how I can make it another day through this pain. That is calamity. And that gets matched with serenity, contingent on my willingness to just do what I think God would have me do. And that is a promise. And that is a powerful promise. And I want you to know that is my experience. Some of the most painful things, this is not a message of hope, but we're going to drive it back around. Some of the most painful experiences that I've had in my life have happened in sobriety. And to the extent that I lean into this work, lean into this God, lean into these actions, is there a serenity that flows, just like that power flows into me, that is not me. It is not of me, but it is working through me, matched with calamity. That calamity is matched with serenity. Thumbs up, natural transition, so smooth, seamless. It's like we've been doing this for years.
You're awesome. So I like to take this paragraph and personalize it because I'm a big student of Mark Houston, right? So Mark Houston takes the book, we personalize this book, because what happens a lot of times is I think they're talking about you guys when we're around reading this book. They're not talking about me. I don't have these issues in my life. I don't have any fear. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous going, I don't have any fears. What I found out is I'm afraid of everything. Like, I'm afraid of freaking everything. And there are some good fears, as Paige pointed out before, like driving down a one-way street the wrong way, building on fire, like staying in the building. That's a bad idea, right? Those things. But these other fears that we're talking about, the evil and corroding thread, that's the kind of fears that I need to get free of. So let's take this paragraph, page 68, second paragraph, and let's take it and take the we's and make it personalized. And I'm going to do this like this. Perhaps there's a better way. I think so. So, for I am now on a different basis. The basis of trusting and relying upon God. Again, we have made a beginning. We have a relationship with this power right now. And it says, I trust infinite God, limitless power. It goes on forever, this power. And then it says, rather than our finite selves, and Abby gave us that definition, I am limited in my powers. I don't have that to be able to change this internal condition that I have. If I could have, wouldn't I have been in better shape when I came in here? If I could have done that on my own power, I would have been my neighbor 2 doors down. If I could have made that change and continued that successfully, I couldn't do that. It says, I am in the world to play the role he assigns. Remember now, I'm not God. I'm an agent of God. I'm not playing God here. Just to the extent that I do as we think. So just don't talk about it. Let's do this thing, okay? This is so important that I just do this. And I'm going to bounce around. I'm going to go back to page 61. You can hold the page there, go back to 61. Actually, if I wanted to, I'd go all the way back to the bottom of page 60 in the fourth paragraph, because it talks about what the first requirement is. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run itself will can hardly be a success. I'm not going to read that whole paragraph, but I am going to bounce over to page 60, top of the page, and let's talk about my arrangements. Go to the next paragraph, 61.1. This is my point. What usually happens when my arrangements are taking place? This is what happens. The show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. Self-pity? Okay. He decides to exert himself more. I'm doubling down here, guys. Doubling down, all in on this one. He becomes, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit him, admitting he may be somewhat at fault, not owning the whole thing here. We're going to find out the fourth column is the truth column. The other three columns, I'm a liar. That's what I am. Is he sure that other people are more to blame? He becomes angry, indignant, self-pity. What is his base of trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker, even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of, this is when I'm sober, delusion that he rest, satisfaction, happiness out of the world if he only manages well? Paige, I'm going to steal it from Paige. I have fired myself from David G. Inc. I am no longer sitting on the board. I am not on the board. I'm not running the company. I am not in management any longer. God is the management. Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants, my want, and do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate? Stacy, all they can out of the show is he not even in his best moments, in good moments even, and a producer of confusion rather than harmony. I love taking people through the work and going back to that when they have an issue. Are you a producer of confusion, or are you a producer of harmony here? That's something to consider. Always consider. Never answer quickly. Consider this when I'm having a conversation with my wife. Am I in harmony or am I in confusion? I need to know that. When I'm even talking to a sponsee? Am I talking from a mountaintop? No, I need not to be doing that. So back to what we're on the page. Back to 68, second paragraph. So middle of the page, it says, to some extent, as I brought up, that we do as we think, not that we just don't talk about it. We're doing it here. He would have us and humbly rely on him. Does he enables me to match calamity with serenity? That is power flowing in. That is not of me. That is through me. That is a relationship with power. And the example I give a lot of times, and I don't always use this example, but the word calamity is such a strong word. Is there a worse calamity than losing a loved one? Is there a worse calamity than that? There's not in my experience. But I found a way to match that with serenity because I have a relationship with power. And the fellowship came around and picked me up and held me together. And my family, it wasn't just about me. And together, we, the first word in the first step says we. And I'm so glad. And if you're new here today, please come back and get yourself a Big Book sponsor. Please do this work out of here as if your life depends on it. If you're a real alcoholic and drug addict like Paige and I, your life does depend on it. And if you want two lives in one, that life that you lived before you got here, I'm familiar with, or do you want a life different than you've ever known? Maybe the life that you're always intended to have, then work these steps with the desperation of a drowning man. And I promise you, there's never been any failure ever if you do this honestly and thoroughly and just do it every day. Just every day, all day long. Start 10 in the morning. Don't stop the clock. Never stops. Living 10, 11, and 12.
Amazing. And I always like to make the joke if I'm like fighting having to do it every day. It's a little like me fighting having to brush my teeth, which is a bit of an immature reaction. It's what we do as toddlers. I don't want to brush my teeth. I already did it. And we didn't. We lied. Alrighty. Next paragraph, page 68. Or maybe you guys are just better with your oral hygiene. That's cool. All right, it says we never, never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men have faith, have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be once we commence to outgrow fear. Thumbs up for Abby.
All right, I have paradoxically, which is an opinion contrary to one generally held, and commence is to start, begin, or initiate.
Awesome. I'm getting better at picking up on the thumbs up. And this for me is where I really begin to delve into that fourth column. And I'll throw it up on the screen a little bit. Because I have the power. It's not my power, God's power, but also host power. And what I like to do, and anytime in this book we see the phrase we ask, or to ask, what that is a prayer. And that, what we saw at the very bottom of the paragraph, is the fear prayer. God, and I'm Canadian, so I always like to say please. You don't have to say please, it's a weird Canadianism. But God, please remove my fear. And I like to say what the fear is. So God, please remove my fear of rejection and direct my attention to what you would have me be. Or God, please remove my fear of amends and direct my attention to what you'd have me be. And what I like to do is in that fourth column, I like to write on how can God reliance overcome that fear. And there's two levels for almost all of them, not for relapse, but for almost all our fears, there's two levels. There's the surface level and the deeper level. And the surface level is what I do is I take that third column and I flip it and I write how. So if you remember, we spoke about rejection. And so my fear of rejection, right? And in the third column, I will relapse. I will be in my active addiction. I will be in my active alcoholism. In the fourth column, how can God reliance overcome that fear? I will stay sober. I can't do that on my own power. How do I stay sober? I work these 12 steps like my life depends on it, because it does. I do this thing on a daily basis, and as a result, I stay sober. Now, we also spoke about how I'm going to be selfish and inconsiderate and not know when I step on toes or how to make it right. Well, as I'm working this daily program of action, as I'm clearing out the wreckage 4 through 9 and continuing that in 10 and 11, what happens is I start to get practice seeing my defects, seeing when I've been wrong, acknowledging when I've been wrong, and making it right. And I become somebody that's a little nicer and people want to have me around. You know what I'm saying? And then, you know, instead of my reliance based on you, my reliance is on God. I'm seeking actively and intentionally my sense of value and worth from God, and I channel that to others. And what I mean by that is all my relationships become about what can I give? How can I help? Who can I serve? And we spoke about that judgment, criticism, gossip. Instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift people up. I'm support them. I'm going to pump their tires. And when I do that, I see that that behavior is abundant. As I grow into somebody that's a little bit healthier, I begin to have healthier people in my life who are less likely to reject me. I practice being authentic and honest. And what that looks like is not me being a dink and saying, oh, it's my authentic self to scratch your car or whatever. No, it is who has God always called me to be, to practice that honesty, to honor when I got limitations and to be honest about them. But the deeper level is even if I am rejected, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use that experience to help others. Just real quick, let me take that fear of making that amends. On self-reliance, I'm not doing it. I'm building it up. I was overwhelming. I'm not talking to anyone. I'm just fine. I'm rationalizing. God, please, because I'm Canadian, please remove my fear of making this amends and direct my attention to what you'd have me to be. And I want to point out as be, not do. You know, who am I called to be? Now, of course, we're going to write on a little bit of some of the stuff I got to do because I don't know how to get to be from where I am. But I like to look at it through, I will make the amends. I will pray for the willingness. I will continue to inventory fear around it. I will let go of the results. I will actively and intentionally seek my sense of value and worth. I will see the amends as an opportunity to be of service. I will leave the results in God's hands. I will write it out beforehand. I will get myself in the middle of an amender and get peer pressured into doing it. You know what? I'll make the approach and let go. But the deeper level is even if. And this has been my experience with the amends that haven't gone well. And that's not too many, to be honest. Even if the amends does not go well, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use that experience to help others. And that's the thing that I love, that experience to help others. Man, life is hard and painful. And I have had a very difficult past 2 years. And the things that really allow me to face that overwhelming wall of pain and suffering and life is the idea if I face it square on, I face it and I'm present to it and I'm not avoiding it. I'm not trying to make it just magically go away, but I face it. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, the worst things that I've done, the worst things that have happened to me become gifts and blessings that I get to use to help another human being. I get to help others. And when I make that transition, when I show up to pain in that way, my pain has purpose. There is meaning to it. There is value to it. And I can get through things that I wasn't going to be able to get through anyways when I'm just focusing on me. Now, does anyone want me to do a quick fear through just one? I'll just do one in the name of time. A quick fear through all 4 columns, but pick a weird one. Don't pick abandonment. Everyone do what you want. Anyone got a weird fear? Or you could pick abandonment if you want. Anyone got one? Throw it in the chat. I mean, if not, I'll just keep it rocking and rolling. But I love that idea of like, you know, who's got a fear? I know it's a big ask because y'all don't have fears and you're all very brave. All right. No. Oh,
Here's one.
yeah, abandonment. We got abandonment. Yeah. And oh, fear folder. Oh, now we're overwhelmed with fears. Amazing. All right. So I'll do abandon. Oh, heights. crap. Now there's a lot to choose from. I don't plan for this. All right. I'll do abandonment very, very quickly. It's going to touch on those same notes that we speak about with fear of rejection. Why do I have this fear? I've been abandoned. I've felt abandoned. I feel like at the depth of who I am is not enough. It means that I'm going to die alone. It means that everyone I love will leave me, that sort of thing. How has self-reliance failed me? When I drink and when I'm using, I'm more likely to be abandoned. When I'm selfish, when I'm self-centered, I'm more likely to be abandoned. When I grab a hold of you for a sense of value and worth and security, I am going to drain you for everything that you got because I need you to give me that. And even when you do, it's never enough. I don't know how to make amends. I don't know how to make it right. And I'm so codependent and so enmeshed, I'll tie it in, I lose myself in you. And I don't know what to do. I avoid, I isolate, I don't have relationships. I don't put myself out there. God, please remove my fear of abandonment and direct my attention to what you'd have me be. As I rely on God, I'm going to stay sober. I'm going to stay sober because I'm working these 12 steps as a way of life. Like my life depends on it because it does. I'm going to be showing up to my relationships with the how can I give? How can I help? But I'm not going to have that same possessiveness. I'm going to leave them in God's hands. They are God's children. I'm going to treat them in that way. And I'm going to focus on what can I give? I'm going to be honest. I'm going to honor my limitations. I'm going to seek my value and worth from God. I'm going to practice communication. We're going to treat it as a practice. Amends helps us with God. I'm never a better communicator than after I make amends because I have experience saying the hard thing and letting go of the results. And I grow into who God would have me be. And people will come and people will go. But when I'm rooted in God, the winds of change that blow don't buffet me about. I'm rooted in something deeper. And that deeper level is even if I rely on, even if I am abandoned, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use that experience to help others. Similarly, with fear of vulnerability, just real quick, that third column, I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm going to have walls. I'm going to be masks. I'm not going to tell you who I am. I'm going to isolate myself, or we're going to do the chronic alcoholic overshare. Hey, I just met you. Here's my fifth step. And I'm not going to have any discernment about that. And then people are going to take that information. I didn't really think about whether or not I should share it or who I should share it with. Man, they're going to break my heart and maybe abuse my trust. And I'm going quicker. There's more and more and more we can write, but I'm doing it quickly so we can talk more about this paragraph. And it says, so it will be God, remove my fear of vulnerability and direct my attention to what you'd have me be. Well, I'm going to have a lot of practice with vulnerability. Vulnerability happens in the fourth step. Vulnerability happens in the fifth step. When I share the contents of that inventory with God and another person, vulnerability happens as I go and make amends. And I will be sponsoring others. And there is vulnerability in that relationship. So I get practice with it and I build momentum with it. And as I actively and intentionally rely on God, I get that sense of value and worth from God, not from others. And I can let go of needing to pretend to be somebody that I'm not so people will like me. And I see vulnerability as a practice. And I use this thing, it's called discernment. And that means to use our judgment without being judgmental. We build trust slowly over a period of time. And the deeper level is, even if I am vulnerable and it sucks and it's awful and it hurts and it goes bad, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And use that experience to help others. And yeah, there's more I could say about that paragraph, but I feel like I went on for a bit, so I want to give you a chance to talk, David. So thumbs up, over to you. And then if there's time after, I'll say some more. So thumbs up, seamless transition.
Well, that was wonderful for sure. I'm not going to add a whole lot to that because that was just perfect as far as I can tell. The only thing I want to talk about is at the end of that paragraph. It says, instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. So isn't this a little bit different? It's contrasting to what we were at just about 20 some pages ago. And you don't have to go to it. I'll just read to you the top of page 46. In the chapter We Agnostics, it talks about the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak and even cowardly. This is contrasting. This is about a relationship of power. See how it's starting to flow in as we're doing this work? This is amazing because now we're not apologizing for God. We have a relationship with God. This is the beginning relationship with the power in our life today. And it says, then the prayer is we ask him to remove our fear. Anytime I see the word ask, that is a prayer. I'm going to use these prayers, use them all the time, utilize them, remove our fear, and direct our attention to what he would have us be. Paige did a wonderful job. I was always under the assumption that is, what would you have me do? Because I'm the fix-it guy. I know how to fix everybody's problems, except for my own. I don't know how to do that. No, what would you have me be? That is the prayer. It's in the 11th step too. And it says, at once. When? At once. We start to outgrow fear. So this is a process of growing, but we're going to have to wait till 7, at the end of 7 here, to be free of these fears, because I don't have the power to remove them, but we're putting them all on paper here. But we're expressing one thing here. We're going from fear, we're expressing courage so that I can have faith in this power in my life. That's all I have there.
Awesome. And I'm going to take a little bit of a hot take. So, ooh, Paige shows up and bringing some controversy. Not that controversial, because God has not seen fit to remove all of my need for your approval. But sometimes I've heard in the rooms that fear and faith cannot live in the same house. I don't know if that's my experience. In fact, it talks about that all men of faith have courage. Faith means courage. And the truth of the matter is, I can't have courage unless I have fear. Do you know? And what I'm going to talk about that is, it is not courageous to get out of bed until it is. Do you know what I'm saying? It is not courageous to show up and speak at a meeting except when it is. And really, I truly believe that faith enters when I come to the end of myself and I experience that fear. And faith is that natural response to fear. And so for me, faith and fear do live in the same house. But as I lean into faith, that overcomes that fear. Now, something I'll say, I don't know if it's controversial. What I have found is self-centeredness and serenity. That can't live in the same house. When you're nursing a grudge, it's not a resentment, Paige. It's just, this is when we turn into thesauruses, trying to find, like Abby, look up all the words that mean resentment, but aren't a resentment. You know what I mean? Like, oh, no, I'm just a little frustrated. No, it's a twinge of an irritation. Like I'm just finding all these words to describe absolutely a resentment. And it's eating me alive all day. Or no, David, it's not a fear. I'm just a little, we're going to have to go to Abby for all the definitions of worried, anxious. I'm just really preoccupied with thoughts about the future. You know what I mean? And it's rolling around all day, every day. It's a little thing, but it's all I can think about all day, every day. And that's where I cannot live in that abiding grace of God, that serenity, and have that self-centeredness. And just kind of talking about, when I talk about that deeper level, even if, sometimes it can be really helpful to write it when I write it, to write it as the most extreme version. So that deeper level of, even if every human being on earth rejects me and hates me and thinks I'm lame and I smell bad. I had a shower before this, so I smell better. Everyone hates me. If I rely on God, I will be okay, and I will use that experience to help others, and then they can reject me. And sometimes when I write that deeper level in the most extreme way, I see just how ridiculous that fear is. And it's sort of, not everyone likes doing it that way, but as I do that. And I love that a lot of when it talks about the paradox, that faith means courage, and then relying on God in this way of life is one that is courageous. When we talk about a paradox is where seemingly two things are true. A lot of times in 12 step, we think there's a lot of paradoxes. That's not actually the case. A lot of the things that we think are paradoxes are actually only paradoxes if I try to hold them in my mind, but I don't experience them. And the experience is, as I do this work, David was talking about, it takes courage. It takes courage to sit down and get that inventory done. Now, we don't want to blow that up like you were saying and be like, oh, I'll be afraid of, no. If you are working on a 4-step, I have some sponsees that need things to do, and they will sit with you and help you do. I have some sponsees that are here, they're like, no, don't throw me under this bus right now. But yeah, if you need help doing inventory, they will sit with you and help you write your inventory. You do not have to do it alone. We'll take that fear out of it. And we know, even when we go to that 5th step, we got that twinge. It takes courage. It takes courage to show up for that fifth step. It takes courage to go out and make those amends. You know, those ones we don't want to do, the bit in our teeth and go to it. It takes courage. It takes courage and commitment to live this way of life. It takes courage to reach out to that newcomer and get their number and see if they'd be open to doing the work. That takes courage. Man, this is, I'll end on this, toss it over to you for any closing remarks or what have you. It's just something I've been reflecting on the last few days. Is when I was doing out in 12 step, there was an old timer. And this old timer, he said, Paige, everything you want in life is outside of your comfort zone. Now, I want to be very clear. At this point in my sobriety, I was not really having two-way conversations with people. I was smiling and nodding so I could leave as quickly as possible. There were no further communication. That's what I was after. So I didn't say this. This was my inner monologue, not my external communication. It was absolutely not. Are you out of your freaking mind? I want my comfort zone. That is what I want, my little zone of comfy. Thank you. They didn't have Snuggies yet, but essentially I want my emotional Snuggie of my comfort zone. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Now, I might have been shot through with fear. I don't know if you caught that. Crazy. But what I did not realize is that every time I take that leap of faith, and that's what these spiritual actions are, a leap of faith, outside of that comfort zone, my comfort zone grows. And I go from in this tiny little box that's so uncomfortable to, as Mark Houston would say, wearing the world as a loose garment. And then over to you for anything else that you'd like to say.
Thank you, Paige. Yeah, the only thing I want to add is what Paige talked about there. It's like when I sit down with a sponsee, especially if you're brand new, or even if you've been around for 20 or 30 years and you really haven't done a thorough and honest fourth step out of the book, I'm going to help you write out the first couple for sure. I really am. I want to make sure that you're comfortable with this thing, that you are going to see the truth in this thing. And then as we go through the process, we'll talk way more about this when we get to step 5. But I'm going to set you up and let you know what you're getting into. I don't want this to be you should have read the text. But if you understood it, you're way better than I am at this thing. I mean, I'm still studying going, what does that mean? You know, that's why we have Abby, so she can tell us the definition of these words. But I thought you did a wonderful job. I am so blessed and so grateful that you were here today. And one thing that I never took anything out of treatment, I don't believe, a few 24 hours ago, other than one thing. If you do not have fun in sobriety, you probably will not stay there. And Paige is fun. So if you want what she has, you got to do what she did. And it's out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you, Paige, so much. Thank you, Rob, so much. Love you guys.
Thank you so much. I'll stop the recording and we can wrap it up with a prayer. Thank you all for letting us do this.